Hello and welcome once again to all of my brilliant students to one of Mr. Beck's miniature lessons. If you've been following along in our class, then you know that we've been talking about characters. You know that we've been talking about characterization as a means for an author to show things to us, like character traits. In fact, we've even had a little bit of practice in class by writing our own short stories. Well, today I want to talk to you about another component of characters, which is their motivation. A character's motivation is why they do what they do. It is the driving force. It's the thing that dictates their actions. It dictates their thoughts and feelings and words and behaviors and attitudes, and it all comes from this one central core called motivation. In fact, the same thing is true of you as far as your actions and thoughts and behaviors and beliefs and all of that. You have motivations as well, and you have reasons for doing the things that you do, and you have goals that you orient your life to as well, don't you? In fact, there's a bunch of nerdy guys that have gone out and they have tried to basically encapsulate in categories all of the different motivations of human beings, and it's this guy named Maslow. So you have here, and maybe you guys have seen this before, but this is a pyramid. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And what Maslow believed is that you would not be able to move up in that pyramid if you were not first fulfilling the things that were below it. So down here at the very bottom, we have physiological needs. You need air to breathe and water to drink. You need food to eat, shelter to be safe, sleep to be able to have energy, and clothing. You have physiological needs of reproduction as well. And so you have those physiological needs, and if those things aren't being met, you will not be able to advance up to the next bit, and the next part is the safety needs, right? And so you move up the Maslow's hierarchy of needs depending on what resources you have available to you. Right? So we have physiological needs, and that goes on into safety. You want personal security. You want to make sure that you have enough resources to be able to survive, right? And you want the security of those resources tomorrow. So if you're down here in physiological needs and you don't know where your food is going to come from that day, you're going to be not worrying so much about friendship and intimacy and family. You're not going to be worrying about being the best that you can be. You're hungry. You want to be fulfilling that need first. And so you will want those physiological needs, and then you'll want the security of having it the next day, right? And it's only after you have that security that you can move on into love and belonging, friendship, intimacy, family, a sense of connection with other people, because we are very social creatures. We're very social beings. Those relationships are really, really high on our, or really, I guess in this case, low on our hierarchy of needs. And then you have to have your own self-respect, your own self-esteem, the way that you view yourself. Once you have the food, once you have the security, once you have those relationships, the way that you recognize yourself in your independence and your strength and your freedom, that is the next bit, because all humans want, like, we have this innate desire to be free, to be self-respected, to be able to regard ourselves highly. And it's only after you're able to fulfill all of those needs that you're able to get to this point called self-actualization, to where you can say, okay, I have everything set, and now I can grow, and now now I intend on growing. And as you go into crisis further down on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, like depending on where your crisis is, like it's going to be really hard for you to be able to self-actualize if you're worried about dehydration and like dying. Right? Like if you're worried about where you're going to sleep tonight, you're not going to be thinking of, well, now how am I going to be the best that I can be, right? And that's actually just the whole theory that is behind Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It is where we derive our motivations. So a character can be just as complex as any human person that you have ever met. They can have multiple motivations and goals depending on their circumstances. And so if you want to determine what those are, you have to be an active and engaged reader. You want to ask yourself the following questions as you are reading about the character. What does the character want? What do they want more than anything? What are their secondary goals? What goals are in conflict with the other characters, right? And so as you ask yourselves and you begin to engage in active reading, you'll be able to answer those as you go. right? And then you'll be able to kind of pick out what those motivations are. Here are some other places that you can look, some just basic like catch-all swaths of how you can figure out what a character's motivation is. You can ask yourself, what is the character's beliefs? What are their convictions? What are they afraid of? What are their relationships? What are their desires versus their needs? What is their backstory? All of these things can give you insight into what that character's motivation is, right? So it's like, depending on what their moral compass is, you can determine what their motivation is as far as like how they're going to make a decision. Depending on what they're afraid of losing, you can determine what they're going to do what they can to protect them. As far as relationships goes, do they care about what other people think? Or do they not care what other people think? Whenever it comes to desires and needs, are there certain needs that they're confusing with desires? Are there certain desires that they're confusing with needs? Are those things ever in conflict with one another? And as far as backstory, like, have they gone through anything, perhaps a past trauma or perhaps a lesson learned that is going to help me gain insight into what this character wants or desires, right? So here is a simple equation for you to kind of determine some character motivation. If you can sit there and you can say, here's what the character says, and here's what the character does, then you will be able to pluck out of that the motivation, right? And I'll give you an example of what that looks like whenever they're in opposition to one another. Because if a character is saying, I want the best for you, I only want the very best, I only want you to be successful, and I want you to be happy, and that is what they're saying to another character, but you as the reader know that they're actually going around behind their back and they're actually stabbing them in the back in some sort of way, you know that there is a motivation present there. Like, why would they lie? And you can examine and say, okay, well, they're lying because they want to save face in front of this person, or they don't want the person to catch on that it's them betraying them, and so on and so forth, right? So you can determine those motivations if what they say and do are lining up with one another, or if they're not lining up with one another. Let's go ahead and let's use this as an example. So you remember reading through the characterization of Dee and Maggie and Mama, right? Whenever we were reading through Everyday Use. So Dee, her primary motivation is to get the quilts from Mama and to take them away from Maggie, okay? That's her primary goal. Why? Why is it her primary goal? Well, as we read, we know that she says she doesn't think that Maggie can take care of them, right? We know that she says that, we know from what Mama says that there was a time where Mama offered her the quilts and Dee actually rejected them before, and now she's saying that she wants them. And so, hang on. Okay, so there's a little bit of a disconnect there, right? We also know that Dee knows about the heritage of African Americans in the United States, but she doesn't know her own family's history. So she wouldn't be able to look at the quilts and say, okay, well, this is from my great-grandfather in the Civil War, this is from my grandmother's wedding dress, and so on and so forth. So why does she want those quilts? Well, it even asks her, why do you want the quilts? And she wants to hang them. So here's the question. Dee is motivated to gain these quilts from Maggie because there is a part of her that wants to preserve them because she thinks that Maggie is going to tear them up. However, we also know that whenever Dee rejected the quilts earlier, it was because she is a fashionable person and she does care what people think. She wants people to see her as impressive, right? And so the motivation here is, could it be because she wants to preserve her family's history? Maybe, right? Or could it be because it's in fashion now and that she wants other people to be impressed by her? Maybe. And depending on how much of a benefit of the doubt, you can weigh those two things and read the story and kind of determine for yourself, well, those motivations are not in conflict with one another. But it's hard to say whether Dee is doing it just because of this one or this one, because in all likelihood, it's probably some combination of both. So hopefully you see how motivation works, how you can determine motivation, and how you can imbue your own characters with motivation as well as showing your readers what a character says and what a character does is going to determine that core of why the character is believing, doing, and saying what they do. Go out into the world and be great, my brilliant students. Have a wonderful day.